So, Schisandra is one that we've been talking about, we've been thinking about a lot in the past several months for a lot of reasons. It's an herb that we think of honestly very frequently for modern people. Your listeners may be familiar with Schisandra as an adaptogen. They might be familiar with Schisandra as an herb that can improve blood sugar regulation. Those are kind of like the sort of herbal side and the sort of like the interest of the supplement world and like your naturopath friends in herbalism side of view on Schisandra these days. Yeah.
My favorite part about Schisandra is kind of in the middle, which is that it really helps a lot with sugar cravings. And so it's like in the middle of those two views. Obviously, you can see the parallel with the blood sugar regulation, but the connection to the adaptogen may be a little more difficult. But I really think that what's going on there is that when people are under a lot of stress and like struggling to manage the stress and the endocrine load that stress can produce in the body, one thing that pretty universally happens is people crave sugar. Even if you are a salty kind of person, what you probably crave then is like pretzels and chips, because that's still sugar. It's just salty sugar. By the time it metabolizes in your body, it just metabolizes to sugar.
Simple carbs, yeah.
Yeah, simple carbs. And so that craving, there's nothing wrong with that craving. You're not like an undisciplined person or, whatever. Because then the next thing that happens is that we're having stress, we're craving the sugar, we're eating the brownies, and we're like, I'm so bad.
Right.
Like, you're not bad. Your body is craving those simple carbs because it is the fastest way to create energy. And if you are stressed out, your body is interpreting that as, oh, I need a bunch of energy because I guess I'm going to have to like pack everything up and run.
There's a lot going on right now.
Right.
Got to be ready.
And so we are not necessarily going to pack everything up and run in the modern stress environment. We are instead going to sit there and reply to the boss's email or whatever it is that we do in this modern stress environment. But those cravings are coming from like those earlier times, like in human evolution, human development, when that was the response to stress. And so that's just the body trying to help itself, trying to say, okay, this is what I need. I'm going now.
Right.
And so that correlation to a decrease in sugar cravings is that as the body is helping to normalize endocrine function and sort of like repair some of the pressure that has been on the endocrine system, the need to crave sugar reduces because you're like, oh, I'm doing better. I don't actually need the brownies so much.
Yeah.
It is like, it's not magic. It is definitely tied into that adaptogen function.
Yeah. So, it's something that you can feel with Schisandra when you work with it. And one way that we often have people to explore that is to get the berries like this, just dried, and just eat 10 of them first thing in the morning every day for 100 days. Very, math structured 10 for 100,
Very
that kind of thing. Yeah. But that works really reliably. People try that. But what we also want to emphasize whenever we talk about this kind of thing, and this is something we bring up a lot in our free course for absolute beginners. We call that 4 Keys to Holistic Herbalism. We emphasize there that like you can just give people herbs, or you can just give people the names of herbs, which is even less and is also a thing people often equate, right? If I tell you the name of a plant, have I given you much information? Have I told you about like how to take it, how long to take it, what's an effective dose, who's a good manufacturer of a product even? Like maybe not so much, but people often kind of just leave it at that and feel like, especially on like Facebook comments or whatever, take Schisandra. Okay, how? Like when? There's a lot more to it than that. And so, when we're thinking like from that span from people who are brand new to people who want to be like, I'm a clinical herbalist, I'm going to give people advice. We want to think about those things that make the difference, like bring you up to that level. And you're like, okay, I can talk to you about Schisandra, different ways you can take it, eat the fresh berries, get this capsule from a good manufacturer, things like that.
Like there's a lot between the name of the plant that might be helpful for you and even will that plant really be helpful for you? Or was that helpful for somebody else with a totally different body?
Yeah.
And you need that kind of action, but more suited to your body. And so where do we find that analog herb? But okay, let's assume it was helpful for you. How do we get from that herb to your body and the improvement that you're trying to see? And all of that is in the holistic part
of holistic
herbalism.
Yeah,
right.
you know, and then the other thing too is like, and we do try to raise that from the very beginning in our 4 Keys course or like any other like day one class that we teach. It's going to be like, yeah, have Schisandra, but also let's talk a little bit about what kind of carbs you get and how often and when in the day. And could we start your day off with something that's more protein focused? And that would change the way you get cravings in the day and when you're like hungry for sugar, right? So that plus Schisandra is more powerful than Schisandra alone. And if we also like take a 10-minute walk after every meal and sleep 30 minutes more in your night, those might not be enormous changes, but when we start stacking them together, we can see really incredible effects. And so, you know, we're always focusing on that. And that's both a thing for beginners to understand from the start. When I work with herbs, I'm also working with the rest of my life. But it's also a really important thing for people who want to be clinicians to understand as part of the job, to not just give even the complex recommendation of the herb. Yes, this type of Schisandra, this dose, this long, right? But, and also here's some lifestyle stuff that's going to intensify that effect or smooth the transition for you, right?
I think it's also really important to recognize that as a clinician or as a community herbalist, just helping somebody at your kitchen table, you know, it isn't that we recommend these other strategies along with the Schisandra just because, oh, this would be good for you, or these are, quote, healthy. Like really teaching that, okay, listen, this problem here with the sugar cravings or the blood sugar regulation or whatever it is that we're trying to address with Schisandra has an endocrine component. And Schisandra is going to help bring that into balance and reduce the pressure on the endocrine system. But there are other things that we can do to reduce that pressure as well. And so when we shift to like less carb, more protein in the morning, this is how that strategy is going to impact your hormonal cascade and assist with the work that the Schisandra is trying to do. And if you take a short walk, 10 minutes twice a day, that will impact your hormonal cascade in this specific way, which will assist the work that Schisandra is trying to do.
Right.
And so really being able to, first off, understand how all of this weaves together, but then as you advance, to teach that to the people that you're trying to help at whatever level you're trying to help them.
Right. And to do that differently for each of the different people who shows up for you, right? Because some people want, 6 pages of citations, and other people want a story of your own experience, or, like an archetypal elemental sort of image of what this herb is doing in their body and how that fits in with the archetypal elemental aspects of daily lifestyle changes, because those are there too, right? Those aren't just restricted to our plants and our flower essences and crystals and stuff like that, right? They're in everything too.
You see, dear listener, this is how much information they could pack in like 5 minutes right there. So again, go and subscribe to the Holistic Herbalism podcast. Thanks for all that. Just a couple comments. Right when, Rin, I want to say you said chewing on the raw berry, or not the raw, but like the dried berry. By the way, I've always said Schisandra. You're in the Schisandra camp though. Do I need to change?
I am, yeah. I think you go back and forth though.
Okay.
I think I do.
Yeah.
A lot of times students ask us like, what is the proper Latin pronunciation of the words and whatever. And as a person who used to teach high school Latin, I can tell you that like I feel like I have some authority to say, just don't say calendula. And like literally all
blasphemy.
Calendula. Honestly, even if somebody said calendula, that's just an indication that you've never heard someone say it before. You've only read it and studied it. And if you've read it and studied it, that is amazing and fantastic and honorable. And if you do say calendula, fine. Like that's not a problem.
I still say pecans. I mean,
they're pecans.
It's just like that,
Also, some of these names are really fun. Like, I always say Silybum marianum because why wouldn't you? Or there is a native species of plantain, which is Plantago rugelii. I think most people say rugelii, but why would you say that when you could say ruguli eye and imagine this plant with googly eyes on it? You know, have a little fun with the Latin.
I appreciate that. And they're just going to change the Latin names in a few years anyways. So,
yeah.
But I did want to say, right when you said chewing on the berry, my mouth just started salivating, which means I'm already prepping to consume it, which I have none around me right now. But you were talking about the different methodologies of taking Schisandra, and I've always really enjoyed it as a tea. And I do notice the effects. Like, man, I'll have some Schisandra, and it really does have like this energizing effect. My constitution loves it. Do you have any take on, say, tea versus chewing on the berries versus tincture? Because when I would consume Schisandra tincture, I would almost notice nothing. Maybe I wasn't consuming enough, but
yeah, that could be it. That happens sometimes. I do want to, before I answer that question,
sure.
I just want to say that your ability to hear Schisandra and conjure the flavor and the physical response, like imagining that's something that we want everybody to cultivate, and you can only do that through direct experience. So like when we're teaching, we're always like, we can talk to you all day and that's fun, but you got to get the actual herbs and put them in your mouth and on your skin and whatever, because that's where you're really going to learn that stuff, you know?
Right. Like herbalism is not a multiple choice test. If all you do is learn all the words, but you don't have the physical experience, then you're like just the outline of an herbalist. You know, you got to fill in that outline with the actual flavors, because there is an aspect of herbalism that is kind of like cooking. Mm-hmm. And if you can't kind of taste the things that you're trying to put together and formulate for someone, well, first off, your formula is probably going to taste really bad. Also, those flavors directly reflect the energetics. And so as you're thinking through the formula you want to build, and you're kind of tasting them in your mind, the same way that you taste an apple when you think about the fruit salad that you're going to make, or I don't know, whatever. Or like you're grilling a steak, and you're like, oh yeah, this needs some garlic, because you can imagine that flavor, and you know that's what you want for dinner that night. In that same way, as you're formulating and you're feeling those flavors, it's like, oh wait, no, the energetics of that flavor is wrong for this person. Like I'm thinking about the uva ursi flavor, and then I'm like, oh wait, no, this is for Rin. Let's get something different. You know,
at least smooth it over.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Schisandra, I when I think of different ways to take it, one that jumps out to me is infused wine. And we've had a habit for a lot of years to have a kind of a cycle of making some infused wines, and one of my favorites is, I call it red over white, because you start with a white wine, usually kind of a sweet one is what I go, not like Riesling sweet, but you know, a little in that direction. But then you put in, I usually go with like elderberry and some goji berry, some rose hips, some hibiscus calyx, and then some Schisandra berry as well. And you let them macerate in there for a while, and it looks like red wine, right?
Like it really like red wine.
It gets all those anthocyanins and the pigments and the colors in there, and it gets really dark. And then you drink it, and it's like a refined version of drinking a Starburst candy.
I like that.
It's like sour, fruity, you know, kind of complex, but yeah, it's really, really good. And Schisandra is great that way, or we've infused it straight into like bold red wines.
Yeah, I prefer it in a red. I have found tincture to be really effective, but I do take fairly high doses of tincture, just sort of categorically.
Yeah, your dose is more like a swig than a swig.
Yeah, I don't bother with a dropper. I take a little mouthful. But I have found that to be super effective, and to have like a direct impact on sugar cravings. And I feel like, you know, with so many different herbs, there's like a sort of keystone effect that you feel really overtly, that is like an indication of other effects that maybe you don't feel so directly. They're happening and they're important, but you don't have like a really good way to express that those things have happened. And I feel like the sugar craving thing is that keystone effect for Schisandra. It's really hard to say, oh, look, my endocrine glands feel more harmonized. I don't know. What does that feel like? What if it feels like that you're sleeping a little better, and that you're maybe not getting as cranky in the day, or like whatever? But sometimes it's hard to notice those things.
Yeah. Maybe kind of cool down some.
Right. But like, oh, hey, I didn't actually eat any cake today. Like you notice that. you know.
Sure.
Yeah. So I do find that with the tincture, but I don't think it would be effective at like a half a dropper full. I think maybe like 3 droppers full.
Yeah, it depends on your body size and metabolic rate, lots of factors. But yeah, and that one, it's an adaptogen, right? So we can take these in larger doses. I think sometimes what happens is people get hit by the flavor punch and they're like, yeah, I've had, this is enough, 10 drops, I'm good. Yeah, right. And, if you're working with Schisandra because you wanted to get, some digestive stimulation, you don't need to have enormous doses. Right?
True. One little berry will do that work for you. If, however, you were working with Schisandra because you wanted a really strong glucose regulation effect, like assisted effect there, but the flavor was a little too much for you, you could blend it with Tulsi, which also has a really good blood glucose level, like recovery rate improvement. That was an awkward sentence, but like it helps you get back to baseline in terms of blood glucose regulation. And the two of those together are pretty good.
Yeah, I also like to take Schisandra, hawthorn, and goji, and then decoct those. And the sweetness and the much gentler sourness of the hawthorn, they kind of smooth over the spiky taste elements from the Schisandra when they've cooked down for a while. Yeah, that's a good preparation.
You almost grow to love the flavor though. Over the years, I've really started to enjoy it, and like you said, you only need a little bit, but I didn't even need to have any Schisandra. All I had to do was think about it, and I already got the digestive juices flowing. That's a great tip about the infused wines. I haven't thought about infusing wines in a long time, but I remember a couple of years ago I would infuse Pinot Grigio with lemon balm. So just for the listener, I highly recommend trying that out. I'm gonna have to give your what did you call it? Red on white. That's a good call.
Yeah, River White.
Yeah,
like the Susie and the Banshee song.
Okay, I don't know that one, but